The cicadas are singing us a song, or the katydids as we call them here in the South. Have you ever been sitting outside at night, staring up, looking at the stars, all the planets, the heavenly bodies on full display for all of us to see? And then all of a sudden you see a light. It's solid and it's just moving across the sky. Then all of a sudden it disappears. No FAA indicator lights, no chemtrails, or chemtrails as my grandpa would call them. Nothing that indicates what you just saw was a man-made airplane. What was it? That is the question that has been asked throughout history. It's a question that everyone would love to have answered. What's out there looking back at us? Welcome in. My name's T-Bone. This is Rolling with T-Bone. I make motorcycle related content, and as you're about to witness if you're new here, any kind of content really. So by the thumbnail, you know you're here because we're going to be talking about Area 51. So for tonight's episode, guys, I'm going to put in 2 disclaimers. The first disclaimer is to the ufology community, the people who might run across this who actually study UFOs. With this episode, guys, I'm going to be talking a little bit about triangles. And of course, triangle UFO is one of the most important UFOs documented. More sightings of the triangle really than any other. Next to be the orb and then the tic tac. So the disclaimer is, guys, with the triangles, I have to play devil's advocate. Because I just can't come out and say that all the reports that came through in the 80s and early 90s were all UFOs. So with that, my second disclaimer. This disclaimer has been around for, guys, nearly almost a year. We're going to be coming up on here in just a few short weeks the 1-year anniversary of Cryptids of North America. The series I began all the way back last September. That disclaimer is, I'm not here to change your mind. I'm not here to make you believe anything. I'm just here presenting stories, facts as I find them, doing research. Because, as I found out when I launched Cryptids of North America, you guys are interested in this stuff just like I am. So my disclaimer is, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm not trying to change your mind. I just simply want you to walk away and ask, what if? What if there is something out there looking back at us? Because I don't want to dive into conspiracy theory, guys, because that's murky water. And y'all who have been here for a while, watching my episodes, y'all know I do not like to get into the murky water. And with that, I have to fix something. In the last episode that I did on Roswell, I had talked about Kecksburg. Now, Kecksburg is a UFO incident, but it wasn't the one from the 1800s that I said it was. All this research, guys, I've got my wires crossed on that one, and I was very tired, which showed in the episode. But I appreciate y'all's feedback on it. But I will be bringing you the Kecksburg incident. And guys, it's very important because it is actually known as America's other Roswell. So y'all keep your eyes open on that. So what I hope to do is just to tell you what's happening, what I see happening, and then we'll make our own general conclusions. So grab your favorite drink, grab your favorite snack, get in your most comfortable spot, and let's talk about Area 51.
T-bone roars like a thunderstorm blast. Engine growling as the trees rush past. Wheels on fire carve the mountain's face. The legend rides with a reckless grace. T-bone shadow cuts the sky through the peaks where...
All right. Alright guys, welcome back as we're out on Miss Jazz. Alright, the opening up of this episode. Guys, we are going to be talking about Area 51 tonight. Now, those of you who are new, as I said, y'all know how I like to do things. And I am a creature of habit. If you've been around, you know I'm a creature of habit. So this welcomes back not only the GoPro view, but Jazz to the channel. Because most of the content that I've been shooting lately has been done with the DJI. And a lot of it's been on Big Papa. So it's good to be back on Miss Jazz. Of course, if you're new here, this is my 2,000 Road King. I call her Jazz. And she is, she's the workhorse of Rolling with T-Bone. So Area 51, guys, man, there has been controversy around Area 51 since its inception. Now, of course, Area 51 was designated Area 51 because of an atomic council map of the area, and on the grid, Area 51 or Groom Lake was the 51st spot on the grid. So in 1958 it became known as Area 51, and the controversy that surrounds Area 51, guys, is crazy, because up till just recent history, I think it was the 2000s, the government never acknowledged that Area 51 existed. They said Area 51 doesn't exist, and you're looking at it on television, you're like, yeah, it does, because right there it is. But for my people who are overseas watching, I do have overseas watchers. I've got Dave over in Australia, I think Hippie Trev, got Tolga, who is in Turkey. Hey guys, just want to break into tonight's episode right here and give a shout out to South Oz Moto. South Oz is over in Australia, and he has become one of important member here at the Rolling with T-Bone crew. So love y'all, thanks for all your support, and who knows, hopefully before the season's over I can get some more off-road with T-Bone content. But let's get back to tonight's episode. Why do I say what I say about Area 51 and the government saying it doesn't exist? Well, this is the same government, mind you, that if you went to them and you said, the roof on my house is leaking, they would tear down your house, build you a brand new house, and say, we fixed your leaky roof. Man, I wish I was making that up, but I'm not. So we here in America have a hard time believing a whole lot that the government tells us. So for decades, they did not even acknowledge that Area 51 existed. It was not a government facility. It wasn't there. It was a mirage, and that's all they would say. So it's just recently that they said, okay, yeah, we actually have a base there at Groom Lake. Now, Groom Lake is the actual location of Area 51, but of course it became known as Area 51 because that's a lot more cool sounding when you're talking about UFOs. So now Area 51 is, of course, in the UFO world, the biggest conspiracy there is. It is believed that that is where the wreckage, the main wreckage from Roswell, New Mexico was taken, was to Groom Lake. And I want to make another attraction. I was so tired in that Roswell episode, I was calling the Patterson Air Base, and I was calling that the Wright Patterson. I was tired, I'm sorry. But in the annals of UFO history, Area 51 is the most significant place because of one guy. Now, During the 60s and 70s, a lot of people were reporting seeing lights and UFOs and all kinds of stuff over Area 51. So this wasn't something that just came along in the 80s and the 90s. This had been going on since the late 50s, early 60s, and it was continued throughout the timeline. Now, if you go by the story of Roswell and what was told about reverse technology, fiber optics, so on and so forth, then if anyone had any indication that that might have been happening at Area 51, in 1989 there was a guy who would come forward to the public who would blow the entire lid off of everything. And that gentleman's name is Bob Lazar. Now, Bob Lazar was a scientist. He had very specific fields that he worked in, a lot of physics. So Bob Lazar says that he was interviewed for a job through a company in Las Vegas called EG&G. Now, according to Lazar, he was hired because of his school background and because of the degrees that he had. Now, Bob Lazar tells the story, and of course you can go find this all over YouTube. Bob Lazar's story and a lot of other stories about Area 51 are all over YouTube. Bob Lazar told of his hiring, taking a Janet flight out of Las Vegas and flying 100 miles north, of course, to Groom Lake. Now, the Janet flights are the white planes with the red stripes on them. I'll try to put a picture of one here that fly in and out of the airport there in Vegas daily. So he says that he was then put into a bus with blacked out windows after arriving at Groom Lake, and he was taken to a location called S4. Now, S4 becomes important because Bob Lazar says that when he was taken in, he was handed several files, of which he said he sat down and he took inventory of the files, read through them, looked at the photos, and then he says, now Bob says he kind of dismissed the stuff as it was something top secret that the government was wanting to build. That was his kind of slant on it, was that he thought they were trying to build something. Until he was taken into a hangar where there were 9 UFOs, not of this world. Now, Bob says that in his time that he was commissioned there, that he worked on what he called the sport model, the smaller of the UFOs. And I think somebody even asked him, they said, Bob, was that the one that was brought from Roswell? And he said, I can't say yes or no, because Bob was not into UFOs. So what happened then, and what I was doing, guys, there was a guy blowing grass out into the road, so I gave him a one-finger salute, let him know that I thought he was number one. Bob wasn't really into the UFOs. He didn't follow mainstream ufology, according to him. Now, again, guys, this is all stuff that I'm just reporting that is out there for your consumption. Back to the disclaimer. So Bob said that he worked on these ships, these flying saucers, and he said they were by definition the typical flying saucer. He talked about the propulsion system on the bottom. He said it turned light blue. It lifted the craft into the air. He said, and they would go to the left and go to the right, and they would set it back down. and he was allowed to study this thing for the advancement of reverse technology. Now, at some point in his time there, Bob started feeling like he could not keep a secret this big. Now, keep in mind, when he was hired, he had to sign non-disclosure. He had to sign a whole bunch of papers that he would be, $10,000 fine, 10 years in prison, yada, yada, yada. He called it the 10-10-10 deal. 10 years in prison, $10,000 fine, and so on and so forth. The 10-10 deal. But he started feeling like he could not live with a secret this big, because he knew he was dealing with extraterrestrial technology. So what Bob did was, I think it was in April of 1989, he took his wife and some friends, and he drove out to Groom Lake. And he said that the first trip there, they saw the lights come up, they saw the crafts flying around. He said his wife and his friends were amazed, and he told them that that's where he was working. Now, Bob said that the S4, he said that these hangars were built into the side of the mountains. He said that the doors had sand texture. And he said, standing back away from it, looking at it, you would never know it was a hangar where a UFO was. So, as him and his friends are looking at this thing, you kind of have to wonder what's going through Bob's mind. Because it's a two-part, it's a opposite side of the coin. The first one, he's not really divulging any information, so he is not in violation yet of his ND agreement, his non-disclosure agreement. But the flip side of that coin is, how does he know where this place is? But I think for Bob Lazar, and again, this is just one of my general, kind of observations. It kind of leads me to think this through my own research. I think Bob realized that he was working on something big enough that it scared him what was going to happen in the future. And the reason I say that is because the next time Bob went out there, they were met by military. They had the photos that they had taken confiscated. And the next day when Bob went to work, he was fired. And that's when he said the real problems began for him. Now, in the problems that was created for Bob Lazar, this is all public consumption. They, meaning the government or military or whoever it was that was running Area 51 at that time, began a disinformation campaign against Bob Lazar, meaning they tried to erase him. Nobody named Bob Lazar ever worked for Navy intelligence. Now, that is something interesting, because had it not been for a W-2 form that Bob had when he hired in, there would have been no way to corroborate his story. But the W-2 form was issued to him from the Department of the Naval Intelligence. And there's only one problem with that. There's no such department. The Department of Naval Intelligence at that time didn't exist. So, there you go. But Bob was scared enough that he went to the local television studio there in Vegas, and he went on live television and said, hey, I want to tell you this is what happened. The first time he was just a silhouette, so that if I come up missing or if I am suddenly die in an accident, you know what happened to me. Now, Bob said that when he got back home from the television station, he received a call and said, do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now? And Bob said, no, what? And they hung up on him. that's when Bob would go on television again. This time his full face was shown. He drew diagrams, he had pictures, he was describing everything inside. I'm sorry guys, I said, man, it's the late summer, ragweed's going on, grass pollen throwing out, I'm sorry. But Bob said, you know, now you see me. If I come up dead now, you're going to know somebody killed me. And those were the exact words that he used. Now, till this day, Bob Lazar is still alive. So maybe going public was really the only thing that saved Bob Lazar. Because had Bob Lazar not went public, he would have probably just become another victim of a accident. So in the timeline of Bob Lazar's story, you're in a time of technology advancement. So what Bob was talking about, he was seeing and he was working on, would later become declassified. Because we know from the declassified paper, all the declassified files, that Groom Lake served as a military test facility where the U-2 spy plane was built. The Blackbird, the SR-71 Blackbird was built there, tested there. And the stealth bomber, the most famous triangle in the American military. Notice I said triangle. That brings me back to the first disclaimer, because we're about to talk about the triangle UFOs in Groom Lake. Now, as we get out of town, about the same time as the train does, as you can see up there, I seem to always pick the wrong time to come to town. But Jazz needed some fuel, and I needed a fresh Mountain Dew. The triangle UFOs, guys. Now, here's where disclaimer number one kicks in with the ufology group. Around the time the triangle UFO was gaining traction and being reported was the 80s, the late 70s, throughout the 80s, all the way throughout the entire decade of the 80s. Now, we learn, of course, that Groom Lake was a test facility. Like I said, the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, and the stealth bomber. Now, the stealth bomber would become a hot button topic in this country for a little while, because when it was debuted and its capabilities were explained, man, the UFO crowd went crazy. To them, the stealth bomber was proof positive that the government was reverse engineering UFO technology. Now, what makes the stealth bomber so unique was that it was shaped, triangle shaped, and it didn't have no blunt edges. Every edge was slanted, and that gave it no radar signature. It couldn't be tracked on radar. It's stealth bomber. But we know that the stealth bomber was tested at Area 51, the Groom Lake area. Now, I know you're gonna, here we go. Now, I've got to play devil's advocate here, guys. And if you all want me to do a episode on triangle UFOs, let me know. Because I cannot say all of the triangle UFOs are misidentifications of the stealth bomber, which is where I'm headed with what I'm fixing to say. But if you would like for me to do an episode, just jump down in the comments and put yes triangle, and I'll know that you want me to do an episode on it. So I think, playing devil's advocate, I believe that some of the triangle UFO reports that came in that time of the 80s were misidentifications of not only the SR-71 Blackbird, but the stealth bomber. and the B-2 bomber. I just have to believe that maybe some of those reports were misidentifications, because there's some reports in the Triangle UFO community that talks about these triangles being a mile wide. Now, of course, that can't be, you know, that can't be the stealth bomber. But the stealth bomber would have had a otherly world look to it at the time, not knowing it existed. Meaning you're just outside one evening and you look up in the sky and you happen to notice a set of triangle lights is going through the sky. Now, one of the things with stealth bomber, guys, is its slow maneuverability. Meaning it could slow down, it could speed up, it could drop, it could raise, it could go aloft. So this plane was able to do a lot of things. So in those days, what we knew about airplanes was you had the fuselage, you had two wings, you had chemical trails that came off, trails that were left behind by the engines. Don't want to get in, don't want to kick over another conspiracy anthill here. But knowing at that time what we knew about airplanes, the stealth bomber would have been otherworldly to the person who just casually looked up into the sky and saw it. So that's why I think that some of the Triangle UFO reports could have been, you know, not that they were doing anything wrong, they didn't realize that they were misidentifying it. So I think the Triangle UFO could have been just, some of it could have been misidentification of the stealth bomber during testing. So now I have played devil's advocate. Because I'm going to be honest with you guys, when you're dealing with the ufology community, man, they're pretty well much full bore that everything is a conspiracy. And when it comes to Area 51, it is easy to get into government conspiracy, not just because of planes and, you know, Bob Lazar or anyone else, but when your government just looks you dead in the face and you say, all right, Mr. Government Man, right there's a guardrail, and they look you dead in the eye with you standing there looking at that guardrail, and they say, there ain't no guardrail there. And then not only do they tell you there's not a guardrail there, they double down on it, and then they never change their story. That's kind of what puts a target on a place like Area 51. Now, Bob Lazar was basically essentially erased. All of his academic records were erased. Jobs were erased. So then you have to then flip to the reality of Bob Lazar going public with his information about working at Area 51. And like I said, had it not been for that W-2 form, we might have not have ever even heard of Bob Lazar. But because that existed, it gave validity to him. Now there are people who came out and said Bob Lazar was making all this up, that he never worked for Groom Lake. I even heard one guy in an interview say that Bob Lazar wasn't intelligent enough to work at, you know, for a government contractor, because he was like in the bottom 3% of his class, when Bob shows, you know, his records that no, he was actually very intelligent. You know, that's what disinformation campaigns do, is they ruin a lot for a lot of people. Alright, now that GoPro has decided it's ready to record. Yeah, guys, you know, Bob Lazar got eat up by the conspiracy, but yet they couldn't really prove that he wasn't there. You know, and one of the things that's kind of compelling about the Bob Lazar story is that no one ever came out from the government and said this guy didn't work for us or this guy didn't have credentials. The government just pretty well much never made a statement, which is pretty telling in itself, seeing as how you're coming from a time where they were making statements about everything and spreading disinformation, and they had certain scientists and doctors on board to help, you know, spread this disinformation. So then the story becomes to me, and again guys, this is just all my opinion, but the story then becomes to me, if Bob Lazar made it up, what's the upshot? Now, that's what I said a minute ago. What's the upshot? He didn't give him no fame, no real notoriety, just a bunch of bad publicity, and he had his name absolutely destroyed, dragged through the mud. He was accused of being fake. He was accused of lying. You know, yeah, he got his story out there to the public, but it came at a great cost for Bob Lazar. You know, when you get your reputation destroyed because of something, to me, you know, that kind of adds a little bit more validity to the story. Now, in the beginning, Bob Lazar said that he thought that he might have been working on a piece of American technology, meaning that he thought that the flying saucer was something that, you know, the government had already built. They were just trying to perfect it. But he said in about 2 days, it was pretty obvious that that wasn't actually the case. But so then the takeaway for me for this, you know, this story is that I can't see why the man would make it up. And in the time since he come out, 1989, 30 something, you know, all these years, 3 decades later, Bob hasn't changed his story. He hasn't changed one shred of his story. Everything that he said back then, he still says now, and he stands by it. So Bob Lazar becomes very important to the ufology community, because everybody who has listened to Bob's tale keeps coming up with the same conclusion. Well, what's the upshot? What does he get from telling the story? And if you look at it, nothing. He got nothing except destroyed because of it. Alright guys, I've just made a discovery. I don't know, I may be having a lot of audio issues with this episode. If not, I'll try to go back and clean it up and voice over. But anyway, it's just part and parcel of what you got to go through with this stuff. So, no upshot, and you get your name dragged in the mud. So what's my final conclusion? I know this episode's getting a little long, but what's my final conclusion about Area 51? Is it a simple test facility for, you know, military applications, or is it a place where they store alien technology and reverse engineer it? And I tell you guys, the truth, the actual truth of what is going on at Area 51 will probably never be known, because anytime there's any kind of declassified material comes out on Area 51, it's usually so heavily redacted that you can't make head nor tails out of what it is that you're actually reading. So, you know, who knows? The world may never know exactly what's going on at Area 51. But I thought it was interesting, guys, and Bob Lazar's story is one that I've been following now for about 25 years. You know, each time Bob does an interview, I watch it. And like I said, guys, there's never been a deviation in Bob Lazar's story at all. But what do you think? Can you walk away and say, what if? What if there are alien technology being reversed engineered? What if that is exactly what's happening? Or what if it's just military planes being built out there? Like I said, at this point, we may never actually know the truth of what's going on at Area 51, but it does make for interesting stuff. So with that, guys, hoping for the best on my audio, I'm going to say we've got this episode of Rolling with T-Bone shot. So if you're new here, we invite you to check out a few more of our episodes, and if you like what you see, maybe consider giving us a like, a subscribe, a share. Tell a friend about us. Until the next time, guys, y'all take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and hey, thanks for watching.